What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box. Today we're going to be doing some hot lapping in Assetto Corsa because, well, that's what you get to do right now in Assetto Corsa. I'm going to be driving the KTM X-Bow R around Imola because this car absolutely rocks my socks. Locking up the inside front there. That's for you guys out there who haven't quite heard. There will be an update coming this Friday as they plan to update the beta here every 2 weeks. So it's going to come with new cars and new tracks. 3 cars, 2 tracks. 3 cars will be the Pagani Zonda R, which, yay, that's a car I don't really care for. Hate that stupid steering wheel tachometer. Who thought of that, really? Especially when you have LCD displays. But the Ferrari, not a Ferrari, P45 Competizione, as well as the Lotus 211. So this car will have a playmate. Yay. Only through lap time comparisons, though. I gotta say, though, for whatever reason, this car, I just feel so good. It feels so right. I feel in it. You guys out there gonna ask what I did to this setup or anything? I just lowered the ride heights to 12 front, 15 rear, just to get a little bit of rake in there, as well as added 40 liters of fuel. So we're running heavy, as heavy as the car will let you. Small little gas tank. This car is a bucket load of fun. The force feedback in this car is tremendous. Honestly, I think this is the force feedback at its best in Assetto Corsa so far. And yes, I'm not upshifting for a reason. Rev the snot out of it. I don't know, I guess this is a track day car with a fuel mileage 6th gear. I don't know. I gotta say, for whatever reason, here in Assetto Corsa, I can feel when the tires lock up more. I wouldn't say it's necessarily through the steering wheel, but I just have a better handle on when I'm locking up and when I'm not. In too deep. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about a topic. Probably shouldn't rev the snot out of it if revving the snot out of it is hitting the limiter. And that topic is perception. Yes, perception. You guys on the ISI forums, you might have an idea what I'm talking about, as I made a giant post about this and people missed the point because, you know, apparently if you have a problem with a certain sim, it's because you can't drive when, well, I think I've proven otherwise plenty of times already with various videos. And here's a hint: if you think driving is difficult, try driving and talking at the same time. It's really, really freaking hard. It really is, but I've adapted, I've overcome. But the perception is what matters in sim racing. You know, I've come to this conclusion really after a long time. You know, I've mentioned before, I've been sim racing, you know, for a very long time, longer than I've been able to legally drive a car. I've been around the block. I remember when we had sims that the most scary corners on the course were the hairpins because there was no grip. The evil low-speed grip issues. You know, been there, done that, adapted, overcame. Wasn't a problem. I still enjoyed those sims, but you know, it was what it is. You know, it wasn't perfect. It was a flaw. It was an issue. Everybody, you know, pretty much everybody. There were some people who never did quite understand this. Pretty much everybody came to the conclusion that, you know what, going slow through a slow corner isn't instantly death. Cars don't spin out at 20 miles an hour. But, you know, some people still hang on to that belief because for them, that is what feels the most real. That is how they perceive, you know, the car. Whether or not that's actually the truth, that's what makes them feel realism. You know, the best analogy I can come up with, you know, just kind of cross-blending genres. You know, you think about Arma. Arma 2, and, you know, Arma 1 and Operation Flashpoint, I would assume. You were clunky as can be. Just going through a doorway in that game is a challenge. Now, I don't know about you, but I walk through a doorway every single day of my life. It's not difficult. I don't run into the walls. I don't get stuck. I don't struggle to turn my body around. I just do. It's artificially clunky, but at the same time, it's that way, so that way it creates, in theory, more realism in the rest of the gameplay. You know, it's an artificial imitation. If having no grip in a certain speed corner is what makes you feel that you're actually, you know, driving these cars, maybe that's a good thing for you. Maybe that's what you want in your racing sim. Doesn't necessarily matter if it's absolutely 100% the most realistic it can be, so long as you feel as it is as realistic as it can be. You know, I'm by no means a Project Cars fanboy. And, hey, maybe on that note, it might be time to actually fire up Project Cars again, take a look at it. But, you know, when I last drove it, I was as fast as I was in rFactor 2 around a track that's supposed to be the same track, and a car that's supposed to be, you know, basically about the same speed. Or, I was faster in rFactor 2, excuse me, but the car was a lot easier to drive in rFactor 2. So, how is that not more realistic if, you know, difficulty equals realism? I mean, I'm not saying that I believe in that, but it's like, you know, what's going on? You know, along the same notes, if I want to go a step further, you know, the Shift series, some of the most difficult racing games I've ever played. Why? Because the car drives completely unlike a car at all. You know, almost everyone knows this. You know, it's not difficult to see, it's not difficult to figure out, but, you know, to some people, that's what feels most realistic. Some people believe that, you know, grip doesn't exist. You know, guys are able to drive, you know, the Lotus 49 because they were the greatest drivers ever. You know, they were just so much better than everyone else to be able to control, you know, 1,300-pound cars with crap tires with 400 horsepower, you know, driving legends, driving gods. You know, yeah, a lot of them were, you know, driving legends, driving gods, but at the same time, you know, you look at the world today, it's like, isn't that what we have? You know, currently, isn't everyone, you know, at Formula 1 levels, you know, driving God? You know, more or less. You know, I don't think that, and I know some people are going to go crazy when I say this, I don't think Sebastian Vettel would have any problem driving the Lotus 49. Except for shifting, but, you know, it's just one of those things where you adapt, you know. The fast guys are fast because they're fast, not because they, you know, are cheating in somehow or they're doing something differently, you know. But, you know, it's just back to my main topic here, because I'm getting a little sidetracked. There are some people out there who will, you know, constantly insist that, you know, iRacing is absolutely ice racing. There's no grip. You can't save a slide ever. You know, it's all this, it's all that. I think I've proven multiple times that that isn't the case. Why? Because I don't feel it's the case. I don't struggle necessarily. Even when I was driving the Ford GT back when it was on, or, you know, on the previous tire model before they started updating things and I switched over to Spec Racer Ford, which is a new tire, much more forgiving, admittedly, but even then, it isn't crazy. It was mistakes that I knew I made, things that I shouldn't have done. If I didn't make those mistakes, I would have been just fine. It's no different than locking up a brake going in the corner or just getting in too deep. In fact, usually that's what caused a spin. It wasn't because there's no grip, it's because I screwed up. I'm not here to defend another sim or bash another sim or anything like that, but you got to enjoy what you got to enjoy. And honestly, I'm enjoying the pants off this car, and this car doesn't even have pants. It's that much fun. Yeah, I do feel like there's a little bit too much longitudinal grip, going into the corners, coming out of the corners, but very minor thing, not really all that crazy. Doesn't drive me insane, because you know what? I don't need to sit here and pretend that I'm going to drive this car in the real world. I've never even seen one of these. You think I'm ever going to drive one of these? Do you think I know what it's like to drive one of these? The answer is no. I can only guess. Just the same way I can guess with the Lotus 49, which, I'll say that the Lotus 49 and Assetto Corsa isn't that good of a car, in my opinion. Or maybe I should say, isn't necessarily what I expect. I think that's much more correct, but, I mean, it is what it is. I need much more time to dive into the setup to try and get it to do the things that I want it to do. I'll put it that way. That's the best way I can put it there. So, but, you think about it, historic Formula 1 cars have always, in sims, had a tendency to oversteer. Always, especially on throttle, they always wanted to snap the rear end out. When you think about it, wide tires in the back, narrow tires in the front. Naturally, the fronts are going to have less available grip. They're going to want to try and slide more than the rear tires will, aka understeer. You have the weight in the back of the car. Yes, it's mid-engine, but it's fairly safe to assume that there's a rearward weight bias. What's that going to do? Think about Porsche 911. It's going to understeer, and then it's going to want to oversteer. You just do a little bit of, kind of guesstimation, a little bit of solid guesstimation, and suddenly you start to see, yeah, this is a car that's going to oversteer when it oversteers. It's also going to understeer when you understeer. It's going to highlight whatever state, whatever attitude you have in the car. So, is it necessarily wrong, or is it just that our perception of those cars is that they have to go sideways? Because we always think about it, Jim Clark, Graham Hill, all those guys, just absolute driving legends, And I mean, I'm not saying that they're not, but, there comes a point when you have to realize that, the amount of deaths that happened were not because the cars were completely uncontrollable, death traps, like we often like to think they are in sim racing, but much more that there was no safety. So when there was an accident, which, yeah, there's going to be accidents because the cars weren't easy to drive by any means, the worst usually happened. It's just how you perceive it. What makes you feel like you're driving the car the most? For some people, they want, by the numbers 100%. Some people just want something that feels real. Some people want, whatever. It isn't necessarily difficult to make a car go around a corner with a certain G-force at a certain speed. It isn't necessarily difficult to make a car go in a straight line and achieve the same top speed or same speed at the end of the straightaway. That's not difficult. I'm pretty sure you ask any of the physics guys that work on any of these sims, any modders in the community, that's not difficult at all. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is all the little in-between stuff. You know, and really it's that in-between stuff that's the most difficult to quantize. I'm trying to think of the word. I think you guys know what I'm getting at, but most difficult to put your finger on and say it's that precisely. I mean, it really does come down to what feels the most realistic to you, and there's a bunch of different definitions. I mean, this is that simple. I really, I'll put a video in the description that I'm hoping you guys have seen now, but it's from Niels, the guy who did the game Stock Car Physics, and it's actually him driving the Ferrari 458 here at Imola around in Assetto Corsa, which is really nice of him to do, by the way, seeing how he works in the same industry. That was really cool. Just gonna throw that out there, but you know, he basically said the same. You know, the physics guy for Assetto Corsa here, they go back a little bit, back to the modding days for rFactor, I guess, for both of them. But he basically said that they share the same philosophy on car handling, the same logic. And they drive the same. They really do. You know, but it is that, you know, philosophy. I mean, even on that same note, when you think about rFactor, you know, how many mod teams out there have access to Formula 1 tire data? Here's a hint. Maybe none. Probably none. You know, it's like, so is it automatically realistic? Is it automatically unrealistic? You know, how can you have a sim that has, in all honesty, probably no data? Does that make the car automatically unrealistic, or, you know, it's just, you can't necessarily play that out. It is what you feel, not what, you know, you just say, oh, well, you know what, this is unrealistic, because I'll put it this way. You know, in Assetto Corsa here with the Formula Barth, you know, that's a car that, it's basically a Formula 3 car if you haven't driven it here, or you've never heard of it because you don't have this sim, whatever. But, you know, it's a Formula 3 car. You always hear about downforce cars, how difficult it is, not to keep the car on the track or anything, but to go fast, to keep telling yourself, go faster. It feels like the car is not going to stick. There's no possible way the car can go around the corner at that speed. But if you just trust in the car, it will go around the corner at that speed. The only sim that I have honestly felt that, honestly, not even game stock car, because I love the Formula 3 car over there, absolutely love it. One of the best cars in sim racing, I will go ahead and say, I love it that much. Assetto Corsa is the only one that I've ever felt that sensation of, I must go faster to actually stay on the track. I have to trust in the car more, I have to push harder. Now, you know, you compare the lap times, and the lap times are within, you know, fairly respectable grouping of what you see in the real world. You know, it's not, you know, you might think after you drive it, you're like, oh, well, I got to be like 10 seconds faster than what they're doing in the real world. That car was hooked up, there's no way to spin it, it's just grip for days. But then you look at the lap times, and it's like, you know, I have no G-force, I have pedals that, you know, aren't nearly as difficult to push in the brake regard, you know. No physical strain, really, comparatively, for sure. But yet, I'm only this much faster. I have unlimited track time as well. That's another thing, you know. Drivers, sim racers like to think that the real racers are absolutely perfect and we have no chance of, you know, competing against them, when in reality, you know, they don't get the practice time that we get, because pretty much every series in the world now, you know, restricts testing time quite heavily. You know, they don't get the track time, they don't get the perfect conditions that we do. You know, even the conditions that are so obviously perfectly well known, you know, even though they might be set to realistic or whatever, you know, we have more information than they do. it's not necessarily fair to compare them. We're not race car drivers, we're sim racers. Just the same as you can't, you know, put a race car driver in a sim like what we have, you know, where you probably don't have a motion platform, you have a fairly weak wheel, weak pedals, you know, reasonable sim equipment for home use, and expect them to be fast. You know, with absolutely no experience. Some of them will, some of them won't. You know, it's just that perception. I say I want to get into the 57s. My PB is a 57.5 currently. Not going to do it with something like that there. I don't know. I do feel like there is a little bit too much grip. You know, like I mentioned, longitudinally, which is just fun to say that word. You know, it does feel like it's a little bit too difficult to lock up the brakes. The throttle pedal is definitely a little bit too forgiving. But you know, it's not to the point where I'm ready to call, you know, arcade, some sort of moron. You know, I do feel like it's missing that little X factor. I know that wasn't a KTM pun, but at the same time, you know, depending on how far along this, you know, early access thing is, you know, I'm very impressed. I'm still impressed a week later. You know, it's just fun to drive. It really is. And driving is always fun in the real world, so why wouldn't it be in a sim? I don't know. It's just crazy. Some people say the force feedback here in Assetto Corsa is brilliant. Some say it's terrible. You know, so what do you make of that? I mean, honestly, this is a lot closer to what you feel in a real car through the steering wheel. I mean, we've all driven cars, or most of us have. You know, it's not like somehow a KTM Expo uses some sort of entirely foreign steering linkage that makes things feel entirely different because it steers with flux capacitors and something. You know, it's just not. A car is a car. Yes, there's different parts in a car, but at the same time, a car is not going to suddenly, you know, transform into a hovercraft. It's not going to be an airplane. It can occasionally transfer into a hovercraft or an airplane, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I also think that in, you know, sim racing, we have a lot more luxuries than you do in the real world. You know, like I mentioned, practice time, as well as just being able to look at the replay from any angle that you want. And just seeing this little thing. Oh, that suspension movement just seems ever so slightly off. You know, you can nitpick all you want. You can do it for days for any sim. Anyone who thinks that any of these sims is absolutely perfect is kidding themselves. Straight up kidding themselves. Time for me to run out of fuel, and I didn't get into the 57s. I'm disappointed with myself, but yeah, I'm going to run out of fuel here about a straightaway. Yeah, I've done that many laps here. I've ran the tank dry so many times. I can tell you that I'm about to run out of fuel. Coming right around this corner. Should be about somewhere right about now, give or take. Actually, wow, this is the furthest I've ever gone. I've done some fuel saving this time. I'm going to look like an idiot if I go for like another 3 laps, won't I? Yeah, perception though. It's a pain in the butt. Running out of fuel. Pain in the butt, because now I have to call a tow truck. But you can't, because there's no need to, because you just hit the escape key. In case you're ever wondering how far around Imola you can coast from, what, 60 miles an hour, we're about to find out here. Yes. Sweet, sweet silence. Using too much track on corner exit there. And I think we're done. Should have put in a neutral. I could have coasted a lot further. Forgive me. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.